Welcome to Old List, New List by the Part-Time Warlords. This is a series of videos talking about how we are preparing for the new 3rd edition of the Ninth Age, an amazing community-made and supported tabletop fantasy game. My name is Chris, and you can find me on the Part-Time Warlords on Facebook, Spotify, the forum, and now on YouTube. We are based in Sydney, Australia, and for Old List, New List today, our first army is going to be the Vampire Covenant. First, I've got to tell you about the Part-Time Warlord Promise. The goal of our content here is to bring old and new players to the game, and to promote community and appreciation for the hobby. But what this is not, is a high-level strategy guide, an ETC list building analysis. I'm basically an average player who prioritizes a pretty big mix of competition, fun, and theme in my hobby and games. However, I welcome your insights, advice, discussion in the comments on Facebook and YouTube to help me learn more about the game and hear what you guys think about the lists and the models. My army selections are mostly based on what I have in my collection, what I enjoy modeling and painting in a theme that I like. I hope our videos serve to inspire some of your own creation and discussion in the new and interesting 3rd edition of the Ninth Age. With that out of the way, let's get to my lists. The Vampire Covenant, a faction of spectral, skeletal, and vampiric forces led by wielders of terrible necromantic magic. 4 bloodlines of vampires rule these lands. My army was built around a deadly and alluring Lamian countess, but grew to include her ferocious sangreal cousin on his flying monstrous revenant. Both the bloodlines are located near the realm of man in Vetia and Equitaine, so I thought it might be appropriate to retain some of their colours and heraldry. So this list I took to a one-day event the Part-Time Warlords hosted in Toukley in New South Wales on the Central Coast, and this was very much a learn-to-play tournament for me. I hadn't played the Vampire Covenant since the very early days of the Ninth Age. The main force you can see here is based around the Vampire Countess, who is absolutely tooled out with the Reaper's Harvest, Talisman of Shielding, and importantly, Commandment. She would be in a giant unit of Baronites with the +1 to hit Black Standard of Zagvod. We also had the Vampire Courtier on Monstrous Revenant, that sangreal cousin, with a 2-up armor save and a 4-up fortitude save, backed up but standard core that would serve to redirect the enemy, while the Vampire Knights and Baronites did the damage. So I particularly enjoyed using the Courtier. His maneuverability and small base size meant he was very proficient at combo charging and positioning himself on the flanks. Here is the moment where the Courtier is about to flank charge that ghoul block way over the other side of that gas unit. Another old list that I used was for the Carlingford event in New South Wales, where I further developed the list and added in some new models I had, including Wing Reapers, a Necromancer, some more zombies, and even more Bat Swarms. So in this list here, the characters pretty much stayed exactly the same, with the addition of that Necromancer to support with a bunch more spells and access to the spell Arise. I swapped out the ghouls for skeletons with the banner of the Relentless Company, which came in handy. So what worked? Well, the Vampress, she was super fun to play. In this event, her unit was just so strong on the charge, and whatever they fought one-on-one, they basically wrecked. Even surviving a charge from a couple of units and giving it time for the combat res to turn back my way against the Feldrak Ancestor, who wasn't able to hit her because of her awesome distracting rule. She also took down an Avatar of Nature as well, so 2 fantastic scalps. Movement 8, solid charge threat, a lot of tankiness, high resilience, high model count, ability to be resurrected, and of course, as I mentioned, the threat of that Hand of Glory to give the entire unit that ward save and improve her ward save as well to make her deadly in duels. Another kind of combination that was pretty fun was the Bat Swarms teaming up with the Wing Reapers. They could team up with any unit, but I found them teaming up with the Wing Reapers with that narrow frontage. You can see on the right there's that Avatar of Nature, beautifully painted. And then we've got on the left there, we've got some thicket beasts as well. So not the best position, but it gave my spectrals, gave time for my knights to defeat that avatar and then threaten on the left. You can even see my vampire knights flanking around the rear there as well. But now I need to transition. So Season 1 of the 3rd edition of the 9th Age, there's really a lot of things to experiment with. I've had to go to a few lists, but here is the first draft of a 4,000 point list, which will probably end up being the points that we're playing in the majority of events. New things that I'm liking are possibly the potency of dire wolves as like an anti-chaff, maybe even a flanker if you're able to give them autonomous somehow. Sheltering standard in the skeletons to ensure that you always have a 6-up save against AP3 or less. And I definitely needed this previously. I needed great bats. I've got 2 units of great bats for some long-range chaff. And I also retained the Reapers. I'm keeping the Vampire Knights, so they performed really admirably across both of the last events. So on the surface, I think a few improvements, but really not too much different. However, when I looked a little bit deeper into making the list, it really was a different beast. It was a bit of a challenge, and the number one thing I want to talk about is the vampires. They're the main attraction of the Vampire Covenant, of course. They're like a Swiss Army knife unit. Unfortunately, though, they've fallen prey to a new points cap. So if you don't know, we've got 600 points. If you're playing Old World, we're roughly double what the Old World points are. Basically, the vampires do get a little bit of a break. They can go up to 700 points as their limit, or if you're on a large mount, you know, a dragon, monstrous revenant, which you can see I've got one here, it goes up to 900 points. Not too impactful for me with the revenant because that's a courtier, not a lord, so the lower level character. The countess, she really is the anchor of my force. She's got that commandment, she's holding that baronite unit together. She's constantly creating a lot of combat resolution points. She had lightning reflexes, she had the Reaper's Harvest, she was around 800 points, and she was an absolute beast. However, now you can see I've had to bring it all the way down to 690, just shy of that 700 limit. That means she doesn't have that awesome scythe that killed so many monsters and just was an absolute menace, especially if she wants to be a wizard. She can't be a wizard and have the scythe, which I think is fair, but creates some challenges. So you can see there that I've gone with a different combination. I've got the great weapon there with the Eldritch inscriptions, which means she will have hatred, first strike, hatred and zeal, which means rerolls in the first round of combat. So hopefully she's doing 5 AP 4 strength 7 wounds in the first round of combat, which should be enough to at least win the combat, if not kill the opposing character. She retains that distracting, thank goodness. But yeah, that's the main difference. She's not going to be able to have divine attacks as well as AP 10. Let me know, what do you think? I've kept the courtier pretty much the same. I was thinking about changing him over to a Lamian vampire, since now the Revenant has a flat armor bonus, which actually means the Lamia vampire is actually going to get a 3-up armor save, which is pretty awesome, and retain distracting. So that is potential, and I am mucking around with it. But let me know in the comments, what would you do? How would you change the characters a little bit? Try to retain their essence though. I'd really want to have this one flying menace and one character to hold the line. So next up, what other changes do I foresee? So we've got the vampire counts core. So I want to talk about core just a little bit, because as you know, or may not know, a lot of steadfast and combat resolution is a huge change in our new edition of the 9th Age. Vampire counts have got in their core, they've got zombies, which are really cheap. It can be rebirthed really easily. Really good at slowing down the enemy. But then you've also got these rattling formations of skeletons. They can slow the enemy even a bit more. Then we've got some skirmishing bat swarms who pretty much slow down the enemy, but they harass. They have this new afflict rule, which we'll talk about later. And finally, we've got ghouls, who I did have in the list. I probably won't have them in this type of list until I run the Ghoul Lord, but they're really good with lots of low strength poison attacks and that rerolled hit. So, unstable. So let's talk a bit about unstable. So unstable, the rule itself is identical to 2nd edition until you talk about how to reduce its effects. A lot of other armies, if they've ever had unbreakable units, are now also going to have unstable. And they have this thing called crumbling. We colloquially call it crumbling, where basically you lose combat res, you count up how much you lost by, and you lose that many wounds. All of the VC units are going to have this. Essentially now we've got the introduction of stubborn. Now we've got stubborn on a few units, which I'll get to, but now we're going to have maybe some easier ways to mitigate that using captains. So if you've got a captain in a skeleton block, for example, and you've also got a BSB, you're going to pretty much guarantee that you're reducing your unstable losses by 3. If it's a Graveguard unit, you're going to halve it and then reduce it by 3, which is pretty awesome. As long as you can keep maybe a White King in there, or maybe a White King BSB in another unit with this new captain's rule. So it presents some pretty big opportunities for us, because slowing down the enemy is what this core does, and you can support with maybe some of those Winged Reapers and things like that as well, that have also got some buffs to reduce instability. However, because the enemy is also going to be getting a lot more combat res now, up to about 6 points, it also presents a bit of a challenge that we are going to be faced with a lot of combat res on the other side as well. So overall, I think we're actually going to get some advantages out of using our tar pit units and assisting with that static score, making sure that you're not always going to lose if you're feeding the enemy some bat swarms or some zombies. You've actually got a chance, since they'll be giving you a nice static score at the start of combat, and possibly be steady as well. Alright, next up, so my favourite units. We've got the Baronites and the Barrow Guard. You can see mine in the bottom right there. Bretonnian looking, awfully Bretonnian looking. My Baronites are going to get Bodyguard. They're also going to get Dying Blow, which I've got on the screen there. And just a little point as well, their Lancers are getting +1 agility, which for some units isn't a massive deal, but for these blokes who are just agility 3, getting all the way up to agility 5 on the charge, sounds good to me. Okay, sounds really good, especially against elves. Stubborn while the general is alive. So the Lamian character, not the tankiest character, relying on killing you before she in fact runs out of wounds, but still stubborn. I'll take that. That's a nice handy little buff. Alright, magic. Now magic is quite different overall, but we'll just talk about VC. Channel's going to be really important, and Arise has changed. So Arise, you're not going to be able to do those area of effect ones unless you pay for a few different upgrades, and it's mainly just going to be focused on individual models or individual units that are going to get that healing buff. There's no more big 12-inch respawn. Now I think actually for my list and how it's been playing, I don't rely on Arise too much, and where I do rely on it is to keep the characters alive. Both of the characters need it, and that's where Gates of the Netherworld comes in. So this new rule means that characters can regain 2 wounds instead of 1 from casting the hereditary spell Arise. And the Gates of the Netherworld there could also be used to increase the resurrection value on things that are ghostly, things that have got Vampiric that usually can only raise 1 wound, but raising 2 is pretty awesome. However, I think you're going to be getting it off a lot less. I'd definitely be targeting my Wing Reapers and my Vampire Knights with this improved Gates of the Netherworld. So the vampires themselves, with this points cap, they're going to have a hard time being really fighty, but also being potent magic users due to that. So definitely see some room for improvement when it comes to magic in my list. You can see Arise there, still on a 6+, 18 inches, so you know that's okay. And you can see it's pretty much the same as before in terms of its actual effect, just that you can't cast these aura versions unless you take specific upgrades, which I don't have in my list. One of the fun ones that I'm really looking forward to this swarms. Swarms have changed in all the armies that I've all the armies in 9th Age that I've seen, and they seem like they could be pretty interesting. All the swarms seem to be given the same stat line. Now that stat line is going to be that they're height 0, which basically means no supporting attacks. So to make up for that, we've got 6 attacks per base, 5 wounds, AP 1. Okay, all of them have got that. Unfortunately, they are going to have that strength, resilience 2. However, they've got afflict. Now, we had this before with the bat swarms, -2 offense, and they've got distracting. A lot of swarms are distracting as well. So -2 offense, that seems pretty good defensively. It's going to, again, assist them in fulfilling their role. But the Phantom Hosts, they've got an interesting one. I used to have Phantom Hosts in the army. I'm thinking of bringing them back in combination with Reaper's Harvest, Terrorgeist, because they've got -2 courage for any unit in base contact and -1 armor, which is nice as well. The courage one might be a bit hard to pull off, but yeah, that combination with some of those special weapons that hit on courage, or wound on courage I should say, could be nice. The Cadaver Wagon and Spectral Blades, another couple of combinations that people have been popping up with. You've got Spectral Blades is now a spell can only be cast by masters, in which you can make all the attacks of a unit strength 4 AP 4. So you can imagine bats with strength 4 AP 4, or swarms in general with the high amount of attacks, or ghouls, fantastic. The Cadaver Wagon also going to continue to provide that fortitude buff, which could turn your bat swarms into a bat wall. Alright, another one that's interesting, and I will show you a list in a moment where I'm experimenting with this. The White King. The White King is our captain choice. He's also our BSB, second BSB choice. So what are they going to do? If you get a White King for 70 points, you pop him in a unit on foot. It's only 20 points to put him on a horse, so that's really cheap. He'll have a 2-up armor save, resilience 5, 3 lethal strike attacks, so he's got a good stat line. He's going to basically make a unit autonomous. Okay, captain means that you are going to be able to count as if you're within range of the general and the BSB if you've got one. So what could we do with this? Chuck him in a unit of knights, put him out on the flank, and you've got basically a tanky human unit of knights that is unstable, and you could put him in skeleton blocks. I know that for myself, my Lamian vampires charging off into battle, of course being mounted and having that long range movement, and leaving the rest of her units behind. So that's a bit of a problem. How do I get around that? Well, I can use the White King. I could also use a Dark Coach, but hey, the White King's pretty cheap. Also, possibility I was thinking of doing this: put a Banshee in that skeleton block with the White King, and then you've got a double threat who can scream off chaff. So something to look at. Okay, there it is. Just a reminder. You know, you've got White King in there, and you've got Rally Around the Flag. You invest in that BSB now. You can actually make good use of it if you have a captain. All right, here we go. This is that list I was alluding to. So while I was making this video, another event's popped up, and it wasn't for 4,000 points. So I thought I'd go back and I would get a 3,500 point list and just do another draft, see if I could put a Barrow King in there. So here's my first draft. The Barrow King, as I said, he's going to help the skeletons march. They've got shields for now. I could put spears on them. I've kept that sheltering standard. I thought, why not? While that vampire's off, it's going to reduce the amount of wounds and, you know, hopefully make them even better tarp hit than they are. So I'm thinking in a larger list, I might be able to shift the skeletons, turn them into more chaff, and then instead have that captain with Barrow Knights or Barrow Guards, or maybe it'll work with ghouls. So I'll report back after this event, and I'll make a new video evaluating these as well. So fingers crossed that they're fun. All our events are fun, but the lists themselves and the rules, hopefully it moves really, really smoothly. And that's going to bring me to the end of the list. So thank you so much for listening. If you got this far, please comment on what I could do next, any feedback on the list that you want to give me, and also what armies you're looking forward to in 3rd edition and which we should cover on old list new list. If you're at all interested in our events, we're in Sydney, Australia. Please check out our events page on Facebook, our podcast, which is now available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And once again, thank you for listening to the Part-Time Warlords.